with AFERM. I'm your host, Paul Marshall. Today, we'll be speaking with the Chief Risk Officer from the Corporation for National and Community Service, Lori Giblin. Hello, and welcome to the podcast. Today we have Lori Giblin, the Chief Risk Officer from CNCS. Good morning, Lori.
Good morning.
Well, I'd like to start off today, if you could just give our listeners a little overview of yourself, what you're doing at the agency, and a little bit more about CNCS.
Great, thank you. As you mentioned, I am the Chief Risk Officer here at the Corporation for National and Community Service. CNCS is a grant-making agency, and we are probably most well known for our AmeriCorps grant, our AmeriCorps program. I think a lot of people describe it as Peace Corps, but for America. But essentially, we support communities throughout the country by fostering volunteerism and service.
Okay.
And my role here is, as a Chief Risk Officer, I came on about 2 years ago to put together, I think, possibly one of the very few, if maybe the only, Office of the Chief Risk Officer, which comprises the entire suite of A123. So I oversee internal controls and proper payments, enterprise risk management, our annual grant risk assessment program, and most notably, I also oversee the policy for one of the largest risk programs that we have here at the agency related to criminal history checks.
Wow. Okay, so that's good to know. So I know a lot of different ways you can kind of set up a risk management program, and it sounds like you're in the financial world, so to speak. So speak a little bit about that. How is that? Do you think that's an advantage or a disadvantage for a risk officer to kind of be in the financial arena?
So that's a good question. I think we are somewhat in the financial arena. We, like most other agencies, our internal control program really does look at financial risk over reporting. But we are expanding to begin testing operations. And I think one of the biggest operational risks that we have, like I said, is our criminal history check program, where we require there be a background check for all those who receive our grant monies. And we are really trying to push ourselves into the operational arena to ensure that we have a full coverage of risk oversight here at the agency.
Right. Okay. Well, and I would think your staff or the folks that support you, internal control, reviews, and audit world, it all kind of it's an important background to have. It probably makes things a little easier as far as assessing risks or trying to elicit risks from folks.
It does, and actually one of the great things about this organization is we really value our association with the mission. Many of our staff not only actively volunteer and engage in our mission, but have been members and volunteers through our programs that are funded by our grants. So I think having an affinity for and a sensitivity to what the agency does is very helpful in assessing risk. Most notably because you may have participated in activities that could have given rise to that risk, and you understand what's going on in the community. Right,
absolutely. So tell us a little more detail into your approach to risk assessment and supporting things like risk responses and obviously getting the profile together and all of that.
Right, so we, thank you, we actually just completed our risk profile, I think, like many other organizations, and notably the small federal agencies. And in doing that, we noticed our timing was such that we were associating a lot of our risk response with the creation of our agency transformation, our agency reform plan. So we were really lucky in that we could link the risks and the association of risk mitigation to the transformation plan.
Right.
And we are grateful that we're starting to see some of that activity now. Our senior leadership is kind of moving forward with addressing those risks and transformation at the same time. So I feel that our program is making an impact.
And to what degree does your program get directly involved with, the response that, the different, risk stakeholders have in the agency? What's your involvement specifically with that?
So for the most part, our involvement is coordination.
Okay.
We bring folks to the table, but like I mentioned, the criminal history check program, we own the policy for that. So we are actually leading the risk response. It's been a multi-year response effort that just happens to coincide now and align with our transformation plan. But we are not only involved in coordinating the agency effort and bringing people to the table, but we'll be involved in actually implementation and making sure that we're measuring for success.
Right. Well, and so something I'm thinking about, if you're doing the internal controls and you're supporting the enterprise risk management program, I mean, do you have any trouble eliciting risks from folks, or do they not want to let you know what their real risks are? Or, what's that approach?
Right. So we were actually reforming and revitalizing our internal control program at the same time that we were doing our first risk register and risk profile. So we had no problem actually having folks kind of share with us
good.
what their vision was for the organization. And I think that's one of the great ways that the team that was here at the time helped talk about risk for the agency. It's, really talking about what is your vision? How's the agency not able to meet its mission or its vision because of things that could be getting in the way? We were actually able to pull over 700 risks from our agency, and it was actually more of a challenge to kind of put that into smaller buckets that we're able to work with.
Right. So how did you boil that down to a smaller number? I mean, what was the approach?
So we kind of condensed things into theme areas, and then kind of moved from there. We did our calibration against themes. So we identified 19 key themes that we saw giving rise, and then we allowed senior leadership to do the final risk prioritization.
Right.
But again, we were timing that at the same time that everyone was going through agency reform, and it just basically was able to dovetail. And we were able to present senior leadership that was coming on with the new administration with an opportunity to kind of address things that, challenges that we've identified for them to help us solve.
Right. So you're saying this is the first time you're getting a profile together, right?
Right.
So how do you envision leadership using that, or the lower level registers as well going forward on an active basis?
Right. So I think it was ERM 1.0. I think we're going to be looking at ERM 2.0 going forward, and really rethinking how we capture risk, from whom we capture risk, and how we associate risk with risk ownership or risk mitigation ownership.
Right.
So I think we had a number of lessons learned. I think we cast a wide net this last time, and I think we'll be doing more of a departmental focus this time, so that folks can more distinctly associate risk with their department's ability to meet the mission, rather than just casting the wide net of the agency's ability to meet its mission.
Right. Well, that's good. And just out of curiosity, what percentage of the risks, the big, the prioritized major risks, would you say were in the financial arena, or was it spread across the different mission areas?
I think generally, it was an overarching, ensuring that we have a strong risk or financial profile or financial management profile. But I think a lot of our risks were in the larger enterprise buckets, which was surprising, and I welcomed it because it meant that even agency employees were thinking from the top. How do we align our size with our mission? How do we serve our customers better from where we are located? So it was just a great opportunity to see how even folks who are involved in the transactions can really see how the enterprise as a whole could improve and better from ERM.
Right. And actually, that kind of leads me to my next question, related to, how do you help spearhead some risk efforts, especially in things that are risks, the areas that are not financial? That's more your specialty, obviously, but how do you, what are the challenges as far as that goes? Just kind of making sure these non-financial areas that they're really involved in this.
Well, I think our agency is very keen on using the input that we've received from GAO, from our OIG. We've had some interest from the Hill and some of the programs and the operations of our programs. So we've been able to use some of that inspiration and kind of forward movement to guide us into thinking about risks that are operational in nature. And like I said, this criminal history check program was one of them.
Right.
We also have a number of other activities that our members, we have to be careful that our members don't engage in. They're called prohibited activities. We are able to kind of think more strategically and enterprise-wide about how we address those.
Right. So as far as advice for a risk officer, it seems like you just need to know a little bit about everything the agency does. You can't just have one, specialty area. You kind of really have to get to know your agency very, very well. What would you recommend to folks?
No, absolutely. I think that's the key. It's not only the key to, your own personal success and being able to feel like you can address the issues, but it's also for the success of the position, for the agency to know that you're engaged and that you understand, and you understand their association to the mission and what they're trying to do. I think it's a lot of agencies like mine are just starting off with this new position and really trying to push forward with ERM and push forward with, tying the enterprise-wide culture to your internal control program or your other risk testing programs like improper payments. And I think it's just really taking the time and the space to just get involved and to listen, to get on those email chains and just follow them through to the end and make sure you're reading those reports. Another way that I think you can be involved and you can understand your organization is really to get involved with those who also have an external stake in your organization, like the IG.
All right.
And I think the IG's reports provide some insight into what others are seeing in your organization. It's not all about what I think the organization can see about itself, but what others can say about it.
Right. And then how has that been working with the IG with risk management for you guys?
Well, our IG has actually been very involved in the launch of ERM. I think she's been an avid speaker through the Association of Government Accountants and has been present and active in the Association of Federal Enterprise Risk Management.
Right.
And she understands the world that we're in, and quite honestly, I think this is the world that IGs have been in all along, right? They do risk assessments of organizations and try to understand where the highest risks are, and have been inspiring organizations through their audit findings,
right.
As inspirational as they are, to really think more strategically and more broadly. But I think even if you just go one audit at a time, you can find yourselves going right back down into the details and going, mostly associated chasing the dollars. And again, it's just taking that big, broader view. But I think in working with the IG, it's really having, again, that connection. You had to work with agency leadership to really understand the mission, but you really have to work with your IG. And we meet periodically, biweekly, if not monthly, and are very committed to that. I think if either one of us are not in the office, we will make it to that meeting,
right? So
that we can connect and just talk about, what's on our minds, what's keeping us up at night.
So is that what type of meeting is that? Is that specifically just between you two, or is that something broader that you're discussing?
Right now, the IG and I, we have biweekly meetings or monthly meetings, standing meetings. But she meets with senior leadership as a whole. We have periodic meetings like that. But I think it's really making sure that you've developed a level of trust. I think that's the key to enterprise risk management, is that the enterprise trusts that you are going to use the information to help inform management decisions, that the agency trusts that management will do something with the information and not reprise against the information that's shared. It's having that trust with your IG to ensure that you can talk openly about risks in a way that isn't, setting yourself up for some sort of a failure.
Right.
So I think we're in that stage federally where everyone is trying to establish that level of trust. These first 5 years, it's almost like the first 5 years of marriage. Who's going to do what and when and how.
Right.
And how do we share our concerns in a productive way? But we haven't hit that status quo.
That's an early stage, right?
Yeah.
So, and I mean, I've talked to some agencies that their risk list is open to everybody. IG sees it, everybody sees it. It's kind of one extreme. In some places, they just don't want to share that at all with the IG or others. I don't know where you all are, and that.
We're somewhere in the middle.
Somewhere in the middle.
We definitely share the, senior leadership is apprised of what the risk profile or what leads to the risk profile, so they see all the risks all the way up.
Right.
We definitely do mask information so that folks can feel free to open up honestly and no fear of reprisal there.
Right.
We share with our IG the final, the risk profile and how we got there.
Okay.
And we're just providing periodic updates to everyone on what are we doing with it. Again, it's that level of trust. Are you going to do something with the information I gave you?
Right. So do you find that the IG's kind of what they consider the big risks are pretty similar to what you all have come up with, or are there any, do you see big differences?
I don't, and I hope there wouldn't be.
That's good.
I would imagine there could be. We would each look at each other's lists and say that there could be more or less on each.
Right, things that nobody knows, or.
But I think again in these early stages you have to take the one or two or three big things because it's hard to tackle. It's hard to bust through and do that first risk mitigation until it becomes just more part of your business routine.
Right. And I used to work with IG actually, and I think one thing we always wanted to see was that if folks did have some kind of a risk program, that they are actively using it, taking action on things, and if they're finding problems, fixing the problems. I mean, kind of common sense things. So
absolutely.
I know that's something that I think, well, I mean, the years before this, ERM was not as big of a, issue as it is now, or idea. Agencies did have ways to do risk assessments and things, but it wasn't always transparent to the IG, or even, they weren't sure what was going on. So,
yeah. Well, in addition to the IGs, you have your audit community, right?
In
so
general, right.
Your FSMA auditors,
Sure.
your financial statement auditors, your IPURA auditors are all coming in, and I think we're starting to see a level of interest in the specifics about how you're running your program, and I'm sure that's feeding up again to senior leadership and to the IGs. But all of this interest and support for this type of risk-based thinking and decision-making has been helpful, and I think a lot of CROs are probably feeling the support of that.
Right. Well, let me go back a little bit to the interaction between your ERM approach and the internal control work you all do. So I'm sure you're familiar with the updates today, A123A, and now improper payments updates. So it seems like everything is going risk-based,
Right.
So what are your thoughts on that? And how do you think that, how do you think take a risk management lens and apply it even more so to your internal control programs now, even with proper payments and all these different, areas you're looking at?
Well, I think specifically with internal controls, we really need to be mindful that it's not just risk over financial reporting. We have to look at all of our reports, right? So how did you come up with that AFR, or annual management report? How, what were the controls in developing those reports? What are the controls in the things that you put out for public notice? We are a grant making agency, and we do put out a number of documents that inform folks of how they can get to our money. And looking at what the control environment is there. So really employing some of that, and then linking that to your ERM program by identifying what's most impactful to the agency as a whole. Getting too focused on silos can be dangerous, and I think that's where a lot of agencies have fallen prey to strategic or reputational risk.
Oh, yeah.
Is because they've just focused on one or two things that are very transactional in nature and easy to fix.
Right.
Improper payments, again, taking that ERM approach, we test the transactions. Is this payment proper or improper? Our auditors are looking to see that we followed all of the specifics of Appendix C.
Right.
But what are the controls over the development of that program, of the operations of that program? Are there proper quality control at every step of the way? So
Right.
I think this is really going to inspire a new way of looking at how we all do our work.
Right. Well, and even going back to how you choose what you want to review in a year, it used to be kind of all these, you have your major programs, maybe every 3 years you would kind of rotate,
Right.
but now there's even more freedom. I mean, how have you guys incorporated that guidance to make it even more?
So I think we're at the beginning stages of
Okay.
really looking at what
Sure.
does materiality look like in an operational state of affairs. I think it was very easy to, just look at your financial statements and do some math to identify
Sure.
those key programs. But when you're looking at programs that don't necessarily rise to the level of materiality, you're going to have to start asking your questions about the impact to mission, the impact of failure.
Right, those other impacts.
The risk to providing bad information. So
Yeah.
I think it's taking that look at I don't know what it's called now. It used to be a Rubik's Cube. Is it an ERM helix?
It's a helix or something,
yeah,
right?
the candy strip, I think, is what OMB is calling it.
Yeah.
So really trying to figure out those questions, and I think that would be a great way to partner with an IG office again, as to what is material when you're looking outside of the financial world.
Right. I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, material for financial world has a specific meaning, but mission or reputation or things like that, does that make sense to use that barometer or something different? It's more, the impact of not getting your programs, the programs not being successful, or
Right.
something getting out that was, embarrassing or whatever,
Right.
So,
Not meeting your mission, not satisfying the statute, not satisfying the deliverables that are and the goals that the administration has placed on the organization. I think we all have to be mindful that our strategic plans are going to be directing us in new ways than we've ever been moving.
Right. Well, speaking of strategy, again, so how long has your program been active, the ERM program? Just a few years?
It's
or?
about 2 years. Yeah.
Okay, so you're still relatively new,
Right.
but have you seen to any degree that senior leadership is starting to utilize some of this feedback to inform strategy or budget decisions or things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Again,
Okay,
I go back to the fact that many of our risks inform the transformation plan, and I think our transformation plan and the ways that we are going to move the organization in a new direction will be funded in accordance with the transformation plan. So
Right.
I think risk-based decision making on what the organization should look like and do next is very helpful for senior leadership.
Absolutely. So, and I spoke to somebody a few podcasts ago about, ever since they've started the risk program, the CROs physically getting pulled into these meetings they were never pulled into before because they wanted to get their perspective on, hey, there's this new program. What should we be thinking about as far as risk? I don't know if that's happening to you at this point, but is that something you might want to get more involved in? Things beyond just the reviews or the things that are more, kind of mission focused or program focused.
So I think meetings are the name of the game,
Right.
and it's trying not to get caught up into too
Too
many
much,
meetings so
right.
that you can't focus on what you need to focus on. But I think our department right now is really kind of focused on the enterprise-wide approach, and a lot of the meetings that we get pulled into are really about those things that cross department lines.
Yeah.
So it's really when there's multiple departments involved and where we can add value, that's where we go.
Okay. Well, I just had a couple more questions for you. Actually, one was related to, the corporation's relatively small. So have you found that being a smaller agency, has that been an issue, or do you think, you've got the resources you need or for your program?
All right. I have to tell you right now, I've circled the small agency community, and I love being in a small agency. Resources are always a challenge no matter where you go.
No matter, that's true.
Scale and scope is always what you're trying to keep up with, especially when you're dealing with a small agency, because sometimes you need the numbers you need.
Right.
We are staffed appropriately in accordance with our size right now, and I think we've been able to garner the support from other departments when we need it, taking on detail opportunities. We've had a number of folks who just came to us to help us from other departments, just to help us stand up the program. So
great.
I think when you're in a small agency, you learn how to do much more with much less.
That's a good point, right? And I think in many cases, you have much more access to leadership too. I mean,
you have access to leadership, you have access to staff. The vast majority of our agency staff are right here on 3 floors in one building. So
Exactly.
It's very easy to be involved and to get to know your client and get to know your customer. I think the challenge rises when you don't put yourself out there to get to know it.
Right. No, yeah, because I've spoken with some of the smaller agencies like the FTC or Architect of the Capitol. I mean, their ERM program. They're speaking to the heads of the agencies. They're right there in the same building.
Once a week we do speak directly to the CEO of our corporation
There you go.
And our chief of staff, and are able to share with her what we're seeing on the ground. And I think when we first stood up the program, I used to present to the senior leaders, including the chief of staff, on a monthly basis, just what kept me up at night. And we were able to just inspire that conversation about, well, what do we do about this and how can we do it?
Right.
But you're able to move much more quickly and make decisions right on the spot and affect them within hours of a meeting. So that's one of the great things about being in a small.
That's the small advantage for sure.
Yeah.
Because I know I was speaking with, I think, NIH, and they have like 20-something institutes, and they're all over the country, and it's very different approach to risk management over there.
Absolutely.
They almost it's kind of an interesting when they have these what they call champions, which is a great idea. To have them all the different institutes and all that, and then of course they're under HHS, yet another huge organization. So I think in a way for small agencies it might even be easier, or you get more access than you would in these large ones. So you can get your hands around it.
We took advantage of the former Appendix A approach, the SMC and SAT, and we renamed them the Risk Assessment Committee and the Risk Management Council, in accordance with the new ERM standards. But we liked the approach of the champion, and we use our Risk Assessment Committee members to be folks who are our ears and our voice when we need to spread the word around the agency.
Right.
It's very easy to find yourself in a meeting where you've got a quarter of the agency there, and you don't want to drain the agency of resources, especially in a small environment.
Right.
So that's why you use those folks to get that message out.
Yeah, I like that approach. And just one last question for you, just about the future. What would you like to see in the next year or so for your program? What are your goals? How are you trying to grow your program in the future?
Well, I think we're just trying to make lightning strike twice in each one of our programs. So it's really, it was one thing to get that. It was just a Herculean effort, right, to get that first risk register and risk profile together. And we're trying to find ways to streamline and to ensure that information is right timed. I think that's often the challenge when you are a small agency. Folks are very, very busy. They're multitasking all the time, but it's how do you get that information to them in the right time? We're all fighting for the September 30 year end,
right.
And you find that you're stumbling over the auditors, you're stumbling over folks who are trying to get 9:30 information into the system. So our goals for next year are to be more right timed.
Okay.
And then I think the theme of AGA, or one of the themes that I took away from AGA, was really to start thinking about how to move away from that low value transaction work and bring yourselves up to more of that high value decision making work. So how can we work with our customers to get them the type of information they need on a quarterly basis rather than an annual basis, so they can make some strategic decisions about how they're going to resource what they're doing.
Right. Great. Well, and I'll put a pitch in too. Hopefully we'll see you at the AFERM Summit this year if you're able to get there.
I'll be there.
All right, great. Well, Lori, I appreciate it very much. We enjoyed having you on the podcast, and good luck with all your future endeavors with the program here.
Well, thank you, and thanks to the Association of Federal Enterprise Risk Managers for being so involved.
That's our show. Thanks for joining us. Go to afirm.org, and you'll see other podcasts there. Keep a lookout. We're always posting new ones. And until next time, this is your host, Paul Marshall, signing off for Risk Chats with AFERM.